So the big thing we're on here at Topo is what we call account-based everything. I do think we're about to hit a golden era here of sales and marketing alignment. But right now, the most important thing everyone needs to know is it's very noisy out there. I don't care what market you're in, it's competitive.
Hello, Sales Nation. I am your host, your boy, Will Barron, and welcome to another episode of the Salesman Podcast. On this episode, we have Craig Rosenberg, and we're talking about account-based selling. We talk about this at the beginning of the show, but it's something that I used to do in the medical device days without realizing I was doing it. And of course, with that in hindsight, I could have done it a lot better. So we go from covering the concept of account-based selling, and then we take one step further back out. Craig shares his thoughts on, or his philosophy on account-based everything. It makes total sense in the show. We look at what you can do practically as a sales professional to make this happen for yourself, and then how this all ties in with marketing and the other departments as well. And then we wrap up the show by discussing how you get into the door in a big account-based marketing, account-based selling sales process. How you get in the door when the prospects, they've been spammed by marketers, they've been cold called to hell by salespeople. Clearly the answer is adding value, and we dive into all of that. Craig himself is co-founder and chief analyst of Topo. You can find out more about Topo over at topohq.com. And he works with some of the fastest growth B2B companies out there. It's really interesting what he's doing, and for the sales leadership listening, it's well worth going to his blog over at blog.topo.hq.com. If you are not yet a member of the Salesman Podcast Facebook group, head over to there, because I will be capping and stopping new users joining in the very near future, probably the end of the week, just so that we've got a really active community rather than a big over-bloated thing where no one's voices get heard. You can find out more about that over at salesman.red/group. And with that, let's jump into today's show. Hey, Craig, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thanks, Will. It's great to be back.
Welcome back to the Salesman Podcast. My apologies. You're more than welcome. Not everyone gets an invite back, and we're going to dive into something today that's going to be particularly useful for our audience, I'm sure. And we're going to talk about sales account-based development. So when I worked in medical device sales, I did a lot of this, but unintentionally, with not really much structure. And so I want you to give us some insights to this today. But first, before we go perhaps through some of the steps, some of the data that proves that this works and this model is useful, do you have a definition for how you would define account-based sales?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll sort of lift it up one level up,
Sure.
Which is, so the big thing we're on here at Topo is what we call account-based everything. What that means is essentially a personalized set of engagements from that runs all the way from the experience an account has, from marketing through sales development, the inside salespeople, to sales, through customer success and upsell, even a product and executive. And this is run against a very specific set of targeted accounts. And so that it's really important to, sorry, I don't want to make things bounce, but I was just calling something up on my screen to look at. But the idea for us is, can you, just I'll put it in regular terms since we're talking, can you take a set of target accounts and have the entire organization, right, commit to, capturing these accounts? And the best way to go do that is by, the keywords were custom and personalized. So what does that mean overall? So one is companies today are spending time to carefully define the targeted high-value accounts that they are about to go spend time on. And there's some really interesting things happening For example, companies are using data, so internal data, who closes faster, who closes at all, and then looking at external data to figure out, who is this list of accounts that we should go after. And then they're orchestrating all these motions against those accounts, right? So marketing, sending them direct mail and, running, sending these guys content, inviting them to steak dinners. Inside sales reps are following up on those campaigns. And sales is involved early. They can leverage. So, for example, we had a client that they send direct mail, they run, advertisements, and then sales follows up with the executive at that point with something that sort of tails this, marketing campaign.
Let me jump in there a second, Craig.
That
it sounds amazing. It is not something that I've experienced, and every company that I've ever worked for, and I'm sure I account for a lot of the sales reps listening and the sales leaders listening that aren't involved perhaps in like the direct, Silicon Valley tech world. I've never had any marketing help whatsoever in my sales efforts in the different companies I work for.
Right.
Is this something that is new? Is this something that should have been how you're describing things here? Is this how sales and marketing should have been developed from the very get-go, but perhaps technology has not allowed it, or manpower has not allowed it in the past? I'm just intrigued here as to,
I bet.
Is this a trend that's happening? Is this something that has always been happening, but just in certain segments?
Right. So that is a great question. And the reason it's a great question is because, first I'll start by saying, so we have this, our account-based everything movement is being driven by our demand gen team here. They focus on working with marketing. But the people that love the account-based everything presentation are the salespeople, because it's the weirdest thing. Marketing has gotten better and better and better at, using content and using technology to drive leads. Somehow that got missed with the sale. And then on the other side, we're like, here, sales guys, go find target accounts and go get yourself some deals. That was a miss, right? And so, bringing these things back together is really important. So here's what happened. I'll educate you because I'm a much older man than you. This is essentially, for many of the older generation, when I talk about this, they go, isn't this integrated marketing? And I say, yeah, in the years ago, before we got into the sort of digital demand gen revolution, we ran integrated campaigns on behalf of sales and their target accounts. We would, send direct mail. We would, send invitations to things, and these would all be in conjunction with sales. And it was because back then we didn't have the ability to spray and pray to the whole world. There was not easy access to data, so we were account-based. We had to, back then, as an entire organization, we had to literally look up and figure out who we were going to go sell to. And oftentimes that was a constrained list of accounts. And marketing didn't have the option to go run Google AdWords or anything like that. And we had to sort of work together. But once marketing automation came into play and Google AdWords and the digital demand gen revolution, which, by the way, is a great revolution, marketing really got good at sort of, the digital world and the joysticks and the ability to drive leads. And they've been doing that now since call it, 2002, 2003 on the B2B side. The problem was that they became so consumed with that, but those leads never matched with the target accounts that sales wanted to go after. And so now we're back here. So account-based everything is definitely a movement. It's catching steam big time. Well, it's like in our company, 90% of the inquiries we're getting are about account-based. It's one of the hottest terms on Google. So people are moving there quickly. And the reason is, by the way, it's a great thing because salespeople, some marketing was doing all this great stuff. And then, we'd meet with sales and sales would be like, really? Because I'm not seeing it.
Why did sales get left behind in all of this?
I don't know. I honestly think I think that was a big miss. And now sales is getting excited again because marketing's saying, give me your 50 accounts, right? We'll get you in the door. And so it's really exciting. But here's the thing, Will, don't freak out. It's Silicon Valley is not that ahead of you. This is a movement that's just starting. So, it's not something where, I would say to you, Will, you're so behind. You guys in EMEA, you haven't, what are you guys doing all day? This is new. I mean, I would say the we've been talking about account based now maybe for a couple of years, but the real sort of motions have been started to really be put in place mid last year. We saw a big spike in inquiry and in our data in November, and so it's you guys are still right there. But the idea would be, let's not just talk about account based sales. Let's mobilize the whole organization. And it's funny. The other day, I met with an executive team on this, and one of the really smart executives said, this is about deciding who the target accounts we want as an organization, and having every single person in the organization know that. And he was like, "What if the admin here is at a party, but she knows all the target accounts and meets someone from that account because we know it and we live it and breathe it." That's the kind of stuff. That's how we have to think right now. And the reality is sales has always thought like that. Sales has always said, ooh, this is my patch and here are the 50 accounts I want to get. We're just extending that to the organization and trying to make sales faster. So that's, so I would just lift it up a bit because account-based selling, it is not new. Mm-hmm. That's been older than anything since we've been selling to businesses. The sort of complexity of, from your days of carrying a bag, of putting together a deal on an account is difficult. But the idea that we can, sort of mobilize the entire organization on behalf of sales to get into those target accounts is that's the real win here.
So it seems to me, and tell me if I'm wrong here, that, and I'm on the side of the sales professional.
That's right.
The sales professional had it right in that they know that human-to-human connections, as cliche as that sounds, are the way that big deals are done. So they're plodding along with their accounts. Marketing get all these tools, they get access to all this data, they get the ability to, for very cheap, essentially spam a lot of people in a lot of cases with a lot of content, a lot of ads and all that kind of thing. And obviously that's changed into more content as ads become less effective on the internet. So they've expanded and now they're bouncing back. I guess there's a happy medium there for the two teams to work together.
Yeah, it's a happy medium. So imagine, I'll give you an example. Yeah, that was I'll give you an example of what's different. So marketing now creates content. They create the 50 reasons why every salesperson should do ... and they want everyone to download it. But what if instead, if the salesperson said, well, I'm trying to sell to this this sales leader at this account, marketing would say, great, I'm not sure this is the right content for that. Let's sell let's send them the executive guide, to doing ... and let's send it digitally. Then I'll print it out and you'll write a handwritten note and we'll send it via shipping and delivery. We'll run advertisements about this idea so that this person sees it when they're on BBC News or whatever. And that's the difference, right? So in horizontal marketing, it's throw out the net and whatever comes back in, boy, I hope it works for sales. Instead, what they're saying is, well, I know how to do all this stuff. Instead, tell me the accounts and I'll make sure it's relevant to them and I'll make sure they get it. So, I hope that helps. It's actually, I think you said it at the end, it's a middle ground. We're doing a middle ground here, right? We're saying, you're doing all this great stuff. Let's just focus it now on the accounts, and I'm happy to work with you on it. And we can go do it together and go tackle these accounts. And that's really what's happening today. It's really exciting. It's really exciting for sales. I'm just really happy for sales people because that was a miss. And I do think we're about to hit a golden era here of sales and marketing alignment. I think we'll be able to make salespeople's lives a little complicated in the start and a lot easier in the end because, their accounts are going to be, we're going to make sure their accounts are tended to. And then it just, it allows them to not have to be the one man sales, marketing, you name it,
Well,
to
let's come on
generate
to that
revenue.
then, Craig.
Yeah.
What happens when, perhaps your company that you're working for has plans for this in the next 18 months, 2 years, it's going to roll out, there's going to be better integration, and it's all going to be magical in 2 years. The salespeople listening have a target to hit next quarter, in 2 quarters' time, that they're pushing towards at the moment. I'm going to ask you a question, and I think I can guess the route you're going to go with it. But genuinely, it's been 50-50 split between the people that have come on the show and I've dived into this with so far. Should, in 2016, right now, should salespeople be doing things like creating their own content and building their own personal brand as perhaps not a thought leader, but as an expert in their industry, as a known expert in their industry? Should they be doing that right now, or should they perhaps hold off until marketing come back and can help them with those processes?
I got to go listen to some of your old shows, and there's a lot of people in my industry that I agree and disagree with on this topic. So first of all, you never wait for marketing. So look, I work with both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I tell marketing, look, we're going to go help sales. We're going to go do this. Then I go over to sales and say, marketing's going to help you, but you got to hit your number, and you don't wait for anybody. That's the cardinal rule in sales: is you own your number. You got to go get it done.
Yeah, love that.
I think the difference, though, is do I think they should be experts in their space? Yes, because the buyers, if you have a set of 50 accounts, not everyone's going to want to talk about buying your software, but they will want to talk about the market or these things.
Mm-hmm.
And your ability to be able to talk about that and provide insights is key for you to build real relationships with these people. Otherwise, they just view you as, it's funny, there's all these stats, right? Oh, the buyer is 60% down the buying cycle. Yeah, because they don't, all the salesperson is going to talk about is the deal, then that's when I want to talk to them. But you can change all that by being valuable throughout the process. But what I will say is I'm not down with salespeople creating content. I don't really care if they're on Twitter or anything like that. If their market's on Twitter, then they should be there. But if not, then it's not a big deal to me. I think
is that just because you want the salespeople to be selling? Is it as simple as that?
The lift isn't big enough. I think about it, and when I work with salespeople, I just think, what's the biggest lift? And everyone's sort of, critical of sales and their adversity to change. But if you're going to convince a salesperson to do something that changes their behavior, it's got to have a big material impact. It cannot be around the edges. And so while I think, look, I'm on Twitter. I got lots of followers. It's been great for me. It takes time. And I'm not sure, even for me, that the lift has been that great in terms of, if you have 50 target accounts, I'm not sure that's that great. LinkedIn is obviously a place we need to be. But overall, I'm not that into necessarily. People ask me, should salespeople blog? I'm like, no. Have you ever? These poor guys, it takes a content writer days to create a blog. We can't afford days. We can't.
Sure.
We can afford an hour, but not hours, and so that's where I sort of draw the line. But let me just tell you. So if you can become an expert on the topic, then you can set up your early conversation. So one of the keys to this new account-based everything is, can we make the first one or two engagement points from a sales perspective with a buyer less about pitching and demoing and more about something valuable to the buyer? And I know everyone talks about that in the blogosphere. I'm sure you've had all these guys on the show, but I'll tell you specifically how people are doing that today, which is they have an offer for the first call. Instead of, hey, I'm going to be in the neighborhood, you want to get coffee, or I'm going to email you and say, hey, let me find out more about your challenges and needs and see if I can help you. Right? Those things are sales triggers, and if they work, they work. But when most people early on, before they're ready to talk to you, they want something extraordinarily valuable to them. And so what companies are doing is they're saying, here's sales, the first call, let's talk about the future of ... And here's this deck where you can go in and talk about that. Or here's, the most recent data on what's happening in the market today. Can we have like a valuable conversation that has access to information and insights that they can't get anywhere else, and make that the basis of our first conversation? So there's this company that we studied here in the Bay Area. They have 50 target accounts. They're very, very constrained. They're in ad tech, which is the people that get sold to an ad tech are getting so many emails, right? You got the ad networks, you got the DSP, DMP guys, you got all these tools. And what they did was they said, okay, sales, marketing's going to take some time. And so instead of writing them and asking them for a quick meeting to find out what they're doing, which was not working, just write them and say, and they gave them 2 bullets about this use case that had an extremely different approach to optimizing ad spend. I can't give you too much details, but just you get the idea, right? It wasn't just, hey, let me tell you how we save so-and-so, or it was literally, there was numbers, right? It said, look, they drove 60% higher, higher efficiency from their ad spend by this new way of looking at optimizing ad spend, which is X. I'd love to talk to you about that new methodology, et cetera. Sure. And it just went boom through the roof, right? So sales guys are getting meetings. Sales guys were resistant initially, like, no, let me do my thing. We said, no, try it. They started doing it. They're getting meetings like crazy. They're not just getting one meeting. So they're going, and instead of selling, they're delivering the insights from this new methodology. Now their buyers are saying, I need my whole executive team to hear this. So now we're talking to salespeople like, it used to take me 10 months to round up the stakeholders into the executive room. Now in like a month, like the buyer is so eager for them to hear this. They're bringing me in for the second meeting.
But let me interrupt you here.
Now we're in, and we have access to the stakeholders, and we built this trust. Yeah, interrupt.
Let me, because I'm intrigued. Is this the same thing as people used to respond to emails? People then used, and it's probably before I was in sales, but people would respond to cold calls. Is this the next thing along of you give massive value up front, which I guess you should have done the whole time. I appreciate that. But these emails that are targeted, big value up front, you get the meeting, and then of course you're pitching them at some point after you built a relationship. Is this something that works for 5 years and then needs to be revised again?
Well, I mean, who knows where the buyer, the reason that things keep changing is because us sales guys keep ruining everything. We ruined the phone, we ruined email. Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe. But right now, the most important thing everyone needs to know is it's very noisy out there.
Yeah.
I don't care what market you're in, it's competitive. Even if you're creating a new market, it's competitive because their designs are on something else. And so instead of asking for a sales call, asking them if they want to hear more about something really valuable to them, it's just, we got to find ways to get in the door. And so the way I'm thinking, the way we're seeing the account-based movement, the differences to the old account-based sales ways, which are all great. Like I love TAS, I love, these old enterprise selling methodologies because they're coming back, right?
Yeah.
But I'm talking about something different, which is we got to get in the door problem, and that's solved by high value offers up front that are delivered not just by marketing but by sales. Sales is not offering to talk about the product yet. They want to go in there and talk about something that's of interest to their buyer. That's often the basis of the first 2 meetings. And the goal there is for the buyer to say, I want to do that. That's what you're trying to do. And it works, right? You build this trust. And then, it was funny. I gave you that little example of the sales guys. I said, well, how's the transition? Like, what do you do? And they said, basically, once you do that, the buyer will typically say, well, how can we help you? And they said, well, I'd love to tell you more about how you go do it. Or many people are saying, well, we got to go do that. And that's kind of we build this trust up front. And so high value up front. And then when we pivot, highly customized sales process for the rest of the way. So your goal is to use the high value experience to either allow yourself to do deep discovery via questions and messaging to figure out what's happening in that organization. And then as you do the pivot, can you leverage what you just talked about and say, and here's how I can get you to be just like everyone else in your market. And now we're sort of, we've got them motivated. We've got them thinking, I've got to be able to be like this. And now instead of saying, now let me take a step back and just show you some generic view of our product, I'm saying, I can make you a star. I can make you just like this stuff that I just presented to you. I can help you do that. And now let me show you how to do it with the current situation you have, right? And now let's have this conversation in a highly customized way to what their scenario is today, what their roadblocks are today, and their challenges are today, and sell against, their current environment. Now that's not new, okay? But we did move away from it in the sort of, I would call the sales world that we've sort of been in for the last 10 years. A lot of the fundamentals got lost, right? You can do a demo online now. It's very easy. You can, present, a slide presentation online. And we moved away from this idea that, step one is in the sales process portion is to understand what's happening with the buyer. And then the step two is to modify every engagement and every interaction you have from there on out against the backdrop of what's happening at that account or with that potential buyer. So high value up front, customized, personalized sales process from there on out.
And Craig, this seems like if the salesperson is perceived as an expert, all of this will be lubricated and smoothed over because you want to engage with that expert. Now, the problem that I see people and myself and the listeners coming across here is if you're advocating that salespeople shouldn't be creating content, you're not fussed about them being on social, if the customers aren't there, how do they become that perceived experts? And I think you might have already answered this in that if your content is good enough and you're presenting it, then you're an expert by association, I guess. But is there any other ways to go about that and to emphasize that point of being one of the leaders in your niche when you're pitching your product and services?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think so. That's where I think where I sort of draw the line on the social selling type stuff is you'll actually never be considered an expert, like on the level. So let's say you're selling. Trying to think of a good example. Well, if you're selling sales, you're not going to, honestly, as a salesperson, you'll never have the traction you have or I have, right? Because we just have, our companies, my company sells me to speak and do all these things. You're just never going to reach that level. And
but
so
you have to be at that level.
But from a sales perspective, that's like you got 100 sales guys. That's just not realistic. What are you gonna have 100 sales experts out there? Like it's just you're not gonna like. It's not realistic from a external thought leadership perspective. What I've seen has been the most important thing is in your engagements, whether it's an outbound email or even a phone call that ends up in voicemail with the buyer. Is your approach to, in a thoughtful way, provide the ability to allow them to understand that, hey, I'm smart, I get you, I talk to people just like you every day, and I have something valuable to offer you. And that's honestly, that is the most scalable way for us to work with salespeople on that. That it just takes too long. You can't. It's just not realistic. You got 1,000 salespeople. Company I talked to, they had 1,000. Well, we're gonna have 1,000 experts? I don't think so. You might have one or two. And instead, it's about how you engage on a one-to-one basis with people.
Can we go back to basics of this then? Because I agree in part with what you're saying. I think if you've got the drive and you want to become essentially, I think most companies, and I've experienced before, there's always that one unsackable salesperson that, of course, always hits target, but then is always brought in to help and support other, whatever they're called, senior account managers, whatever the title is.
Right.
If you want to become that, I think there's an opportunity for a lot of people in that kind of role to become a micro expert in their niche. And I've seen it in the medical device world with people who've been in the niche and worked for the companies for 20 years, and it's all happened before social selling and all that kind of thing. But I'm just really intrigued as to whether you can become an expert by association of good literature, things like that, and the really old school ways of going about it, which we never talk about, and we probably should, of things like a couple of client testimonials at the bottom of your emails and things like that are something that perhaps every salesperson listening could grab. And would that have some kind of impact? Would that, from the data perspective, perhaps increase response rates and that kind of thing?
I think that's interesting. Actually, that's a new idea for me. I think so. You said a bunch of stuff here.
So what I'm getting at is, have we gone overboard with social? And it's obviously it's the shiny object in the room. Are we using social to build audiences, to create content, to all this kind of stuff, when just a couple of really good client testimonials from people that you've really helped in the past, is that enough to move the needle enough from random sales dude to perhaps I should speak to this expert who is not trying to sell me anything, he's trying to give me value up front?
Well, I definitely think that would be that's extremely valuable. And, and just on a side note on that, one of the things you want to make sure that client or network testimonials, by the way, it doesn't even have to just be a client. It can be anybody. They understand what we're trying to do here, which is to, present ourselves as someone who understands the medical, device space, in particular, radiation automation space or whatever that might be. I think that would be really helpful. I think, if you take that a step further, we all know referrals are the best route to getting to those prospects. These hard to reach prospects, and in account based, it's like almost everything, right? It's so hard to get into accounts these days that a referral is the best way. And those referrers are more likely to refer you if they believe you're about to add value to their network. And number two is they feel really comfortable in making the intro if they say, hey, this guy really helped me understand, what's happening with other IT guys at hospitals throughout the UK. And, I thought it'd be really valuable for you guys to connect and talk about what he or she is seeing out there in the market. What a great setup.
You're making it easy for them as well, aren't you?
Oh man, they love it because they're adding value to their network. I remember I was talking to a sales rep who was trying to, had read all this stuff and trying to do referrals, and I said, okay, well, what's happening? He's like, well, people are ignoring me or not agreeing to do it. And I said, well, let's look at what you're asking them to do. And it's like this very hey, can you introduce me to them? I'd love to, brief them on what we're doing today and see if it's a fit. Like nobody wants to refer someone for that. I mean, so I was just thinking like, you have these client testimonials. I think the bigger point is, which by the way, I thought was a great idea. I wrote that down as something that I want to go talk to people about is this fostering of your customer community. And to, if you build that relationship and that reputation with them, they have something valuable to offer that allows you to really leverage them. Right. And to, allow you as a salesperson wanting to be a valuable expert to, leverage those people to be introduced to more of their friends or people internally in their organization because, you've built that trust and they feel a lot better about, doing that referral. I think that's the bigger point. And then you'd have all these cool things like you just mentioned. Like, what if you had a customer testimonial on the bottom of your email signature, like you just said? That was a great idea. And instead of being, how everyone has in their email signature, come take a demo. What if it said, I worked with Will, and he helped me understand ... And that was the, most valuable point in our relationship. It's like, now you're marketing yourself. Right? I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, you're marketing to yourself as someone who actually does stuff, makes a difference, rather than someone's just going to get a pitch and shove it down your neck, which I think some sales people do. Perhaps they get a good run out of it, but I like everything that we're talking about. I think and I do it on the show as well. I get shiny object syndrome of social this, LinkedIn this, new product this, new tools, sales enablement, and they're going to help us do all this. When it always comes back to referrals, becoming that expert, and just having good relationships. And it probably always will. That's probably what separates salespeople from marketers, and that's probably why there will always be a split there between, because you need different personalities to do different things. Yeah. And with that, Craig, I've got one question to ask everyone that comes on the show, and that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at sales?
That's sales? Did you ask me this last time? Yep. I'm nervous. I'm not going to be consistent here.
It's fine. No one is.
No, I think... well, I don't know if this is actually different than what happened to me early in my career, which was, this idea of, how, your sort of view of sales. I don't know if, there was this, I'll just tell you a story and then I'll apply it to what I tell my, older self. So there's a woman named Stephanie Buscemi, who's I think she's like the GM for analytics at Salesforce. And she's a colleague of mine, and she worked at a BI company called Brio a long time ago, which, was a successful company, but it took a long time for them to sort of take off. And I asked her, what was your biggest learning during that time? I think she was a VP of marketing. She said, what I learned was until you realize that people don't buy Legos, they buy the ability to build the Millennium Falcon, it's very hard to be successful. And that always stuck with me because, when you're young, you're thinking about sales as this, like, I got to make sure they understand everything about the product and I hope that they buy. But if you can, at an early age in your sales career, be realizing that you're helping, you're not selling the actual Lego, you're trying to help them build their Millennium Falcon, right? Allow them to do what they want to do. Just having that point of view, allows you to question the things that you're doing and sort of sets you up for, thinking about sales in the right way. I notice this now that I'm working with all these millennials. The ones that are getting ahead the fastest are the ones who, when you talk to them, they're on their own, realizing, well, I try to ask, these 20 questions, and then I try to present them this, really unique sort of personalized, presentation of our product. They pick it up on their own. That's, not everyone does, as you have a lot of salespeople, and it's like reading off a data sheet. So if I had to look back, I would tell myself, I just want you to remember one thing as you enter sales. People don't buy Legos. They buy the ability to build the Millennium Falcon. And I would add to that, their Millennium Falcon.
I love that, and I'm really intrigued. Was the Millennium Falcon the product of the toy that she used, or is that something that you've added to the story because you love Star Wars?
She used that. That was her quote. And the reason is analytics is the perfect example. When you build a technology, the analytics inventor is often a tech person who says, well, big data is a perfect example. Hey, we've created this big data, but nobody knows how to use it. And so, she was talking about from a marketing perspective is, well, you don't go and say, hey, we do analytics in this unique way that nobody else does. You go to them and say, what are you doing for forecasting? Let me help you understand how you can do so you think about it in terms of their use case instead of saying, well, I have this cool analytics thing and it does these 4 things. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until they thought about, well, what are the various Millennium Falcons that people do? And how can we identify those and help people get there? And I think, that was her quote. I honestly did not hack a thing there. And it's such a great quote. And it's funny, I saw her a couple months ago and I said, hey, I've been using your quote. And she started listing off all these quotes. I'm like, no, none of those. You told me this. And she didn't even remember.
Wow.
So, but I still got to attribute it to her because she's so smart. So.
Good stuff. Well, Craig, wrap up the show. Tell us a little bit about Topo, where the audience can find out more about it, and everything that you do over there, because it's exciting.
Yeah, so, you can find us at topohq.com, and we're a research advisory and consulting firm that studies high-growth companies, so the fastest-growing companies in the world, and we try to figure out what they're doing from their strategy, people, process, technology, and tactics, and then people can buy, those insights in either a subscription or from our consulting team. And it's been a great model. We've been doing this for, 2.5 years, and we're just going like this. We have now hundreds of customers, and it's a really exciting time. So I would say we've proven we're onto something, and, you can see that I love talking about this kind of stuff. So.
Amazing stuff, Craig. Well, with that, I want to thank you for your time today, and I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Yeah, you bet. It's always a pleasure. Let me know again when you want me on, because this is fun.
And there we have it. Thank you, Craig, for your time. Thank you for coming on the show. We'll dive into this deeper in a future episode, I'm sure, because there's clearly a shift in the B2B world for this account-based setup. And I think it's important for me and everyone else, Sales Nation, to be ahead of the game with this kind of thing. Thank you, Sales Nation, for tuning in, as always. And I will speak with you all again tomorrow.